everybody, and welcome to today's event, Connecting for Wellbeing, an audience with US Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy. Very delighted to be hosting this event today. So my name is Dr. Catherine Woods. I am current Vice Provost for Student Academic Engagement here at UCL, and I'm so delighted to be welcoming to all of you to this event. So as many of you will know, and that we're very proud of, we've been doing a lot this year, in the last couple of years, to promote student wellbeing and help students build relationships so they have a positive time at university, and so that university is a fun and joyful experience that supports student well-being. And to support that endeavour, we've been doing quite a lot in the last year, 18 months in particular. For example, we've developed our mental health and wellbeing priority principles, which committed us to developing a whole university approach to building a healthy community. So watch this space, there'll be more in that coming in the next 6 months. Equally, we've got our new ambitions of teaching excellence, which prioritise creating an educational experience that enhances belonging for students, but that also celebrates the joy of education and how much that brings and enriches people's lives, both those that educate but students as well. And among other things, this will be supported by our new personal tutoring, academic advising, I think is the terminology used in the United States. And what we're doing there is really developing an approach which promotes getting students to think proactively about their personal development, making the most holistically of their university experience, and studying well. That's a word, a phrase that you're going to be hearing a lot more shortly. And all of this, of course, is before we get to our quite exceptional student life strategy, which is kind of the centrepiece of this whole thing. It glues it together. And really what that's all about is about how we enrich student life through sports, through arts, volunteering, intercultural engagement. It's really a piece of work that we're exceptionally proud of. And the first of our two speakers, Mary McHarg, has been hugely influential in the development of the strategy. I've heard even in certain sections she held the pen, which is really great. Mary, she is our Students Union President. Before that, she was our Activities and Engagement Officer, and I think Mary's all things art. I think she would likely relate to describe her in that way. Our second speaker is Vice Admiral Vivek Murthy. Dr. Murthy was confirmed by the US Senate in March 2021 to serve as the 21st Surgeon General of the United States. And as the nation's top doctor, he helps to advance the health and well-being of all Americans. And in this role, he's worked to address multiple public health issues, including those that focus on issues relating to young people. So the youth mental health crisis, looking at the impact of social media on young people's health and well-being, looking at themes of loneliness and isolation, and burnout in the health working community. So all really big topical issues, which hopefully we'll get into a little bit today. So we're delighted to have you join us today. So thank you, and to all of you for joining. I'm now going to hand over to Mary to take us live.
Thanks so much, Catherine. Thanks so much, everyone, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. So as mentioned, my name is Mary McHarg. If you don't know who I am, I'm the current president of the Students Union here at UCL. And today we're going to be discussing a whole bunch of things, I hope, but most importantly, the importance of relationships and maintaining our well-being and students' well-being at university. So in terms of the little format of how things are going to go today, we're going to start with an intro from Dr. Murthy, and we aim to make things a little bit interactive for you. So there's going to be a chance to hopefully participate in things if you want. And then following that, we're going to have an open conversation between myself and Dr. Murthy, talking about all sorts of things. And then finally, we're going to end with a Q&A. Hopefully you've submitted some questions in your tickets for this event, and we're going to be going through those pre-submitted questions at the end. So just as a reminder, due to the time constraints and to make sure we get through everything, unfortunately we're not going to be able to take any live questions. Fab. In which case, I will hand straight over to Dr. Murthy to get started.
Well, thank you, Mary, and thank you to UCL for being such wonderful hosts and giving us a chance to be here together with all of you. It is It's wonderful to be here in England. I was actually born in England, and my parents lived here for about 7 years, a long time ago. But they still have many fond memories and talk often about their time in England. And I blamed actually that time, credit, choose which word you want, for the fact that even growing up and when I was in university in the US, I would still use words like lift, and they would tell people that I would ring them, when I was going to call them, and they would always give me a peculiar look, but that's what I grew up hearing. So I still carry that with me. But I'm glad to be here with all of you today, because in the United States, we have, over the last few years, been focusing much of our time on the broader crisis of mental health that's affecting our country, but also affecting many countries around the world. And I know that the UK and the US share many wonderful positive things, but one of the challenges that we share is a deeper youth mental health crisis with rates of anxiety, depression, and loneliness and isolation that are extraordinarily high, and particularly among young people. One of the reasons that we actually began focusing on the issue of loneliness and isolation was in fact because of the surprising health impact that we realized loneliness had. So in digging into some of the science around this, we realized actually that when people are struggling with being lonely and disconnected from each other, that increases their risk of depression and anxiety and suicide. But it also increases their risk of heart disease and dementia and stroke and premature death. And all of this is because our connections with each other, they're more than just a nice thing to have. They're more than something that makes us feel good. They're also something that's vital to our survival. And the fact that many of us are missing that in our life poses a serious threat to our individual health, but it also poses a threat to society, because we know when we're all more connected to one another, it turns out actually it affects positively students' performance in school. It also positively affects our productivity in the workplace. It helps protect against division and polarization, which have become such profound modern day problems in the United States, in the UK, and in many countries around the world. So it's for these reasons that we have come to focus much of our time and effort and energy on how to rebuild the social fabric of our communities. And the reason this is so vital right now is not just because of the health consequences, but because of how common loneliness has become. So in the US and in the UK, 1 in 2 adults are experiencing loneliness. That's a profound number, 1 in 10. That's more than the number of people who have diabetes. That's more than the number of people who have many other illnesses that we spend a lot of time and energy thinking about. So this is very common. It's also very consequential for our health and well-being. And the truth is, I suspect all of us likely have a personal story or know someone who is struggling with loneliness in their lives. This is extraordinarily common. In fact, just by show of hands, how many people here know someone who's dealing with loneliness or isolation in their lives? Yeah, so almost everyone. So it's an incredibly common thing, but despite that, we don't talk about it very often. And there are a bunch of reasons why. Sometimes we don't have language for it. Sometimes we're not sure if we're the only ones feeling it. Sometimes we think maybe if we are feeling it, something's wrong with us, and we may feel a sense of shame. That's actually what I experienced. When I was younger and I was struggling with loneliness, I didn't talk about it because I was ashamed to talk about it. And it was only years later that I realized, hey, a lot of people are actually feeling this way. So anyway, that's why I'm glad that we're here to talk about it. We want to talk, the conversation that Mary and I are going to have, we'll dip into a little bit of what we can do about it. And that's the good news, is that this isn't a problem we just have to watch and feel bad about. This is one that we can actually reflect on and solve. But we can only do that if we know what strategies work to tackle it. So that's a bit of what we're going to talk about today. So Mary, I'm so glad we're doing this together. So
yeah, no,
I'll take it
I'm
over
so
to you.
excited, absolutely. So to kind of start things off, as you've kind of assessed the US's overall health and well-being, you've said that mental health is this generation's #1 health crisis. So can you talk to me a bit about why mental health has become so significant to you as the Surgeon General currently?
Well, I think the reason is just like with loneliness, with mental health more broadly, more and more people are having experiences and challenges with their mental health. And we know among young people this is extraordinarily common. About 1 in 5 young people are living with a diagnosable mental illness. But there are many who may not have a diagnosable condition, but may be struggling as well. So this is extraordinarily common. And in the broader, and it's not just young people, to be clear, it's a challenge across the board. The reason I think this is so important, and not just one more issue to add to the long list of health issues we have to deal with, is because our mental health is really the fuel that allows us to show up in all parts of our life, to show up for our families, to show up in our community, show up at school and in the workplace. And we know that when we're struggling with our mental health, just our performance, our engagement in all those dimensions goes down, right? So just think about it, like if you've ever had a bad day at university or at work, right? And then you've gone home. How do you interact with the people at home after you've had a rotten day, at work, right? Like, if your mind's in a bad place when you go home, you might be short-tempered, you might be impatient, at home. And the opposite is true too, right? If you're really struggling at home, then that affects how you show up in the workplace. So who we are doesn't start and stop when we enter into university or we enter the threshold at work, right? We're human beings through and through, and how we feel in one dimension affects how we feel in another. And so one of the things that became sort of clear to me is that if you look at how common mental health struggles are, if you understand how that's really fueling so much of how we show up in the world, if we don't refill our tank again, so to speak, we don't address these deeper mental health concerns that we have, it's going to affect all parts of society, right? And so that's why this is, to me, such a vital foundational issue. And it's why I talk about this as one of it really is the defining public health challenge of our time, because we are just also seeing such a massive increase in the amount of struggle and strain that people are dealing with. And it's for a bunch of reasons, right? It's in part because there are real hardships that people are dealing with in their life, number one. Two, it's also though because we're hearing about all of this negative information 24/7 in ways that never happened before in the history of humanity, right? So when I was growing up, if I wanted to turn off the flow of negative information into my life, I got up off the couch and I turned off the TV, and it stopped, because that was the only channel through which news could flow into my life, other than the daily newspaper, which I primarily used to look at sports scores. So but now, 24/7, it's buzzing in your pocket, and we live in a headline society, right, where the goal is to get the headline that's going to grab people's attention. And human psychology tells us very clearly that the easiest way to grab someone's attention is to stoke anxiety or fear or anger, right? So you've got dark headlines 24/7 coming at you, right? And if you're constantly hearing that the world is broken, that's what you believe, right? And it's not that there's not bad things happening in the world, but there's a lot of good that's also in the world, but we just don't hear about it. We don't see it. It's buried. It's under the surface. So you've got a combination of real hardship. You've got a combination of that, of negative information being just pumped into people's lives 24/7 through scary headlines. And then all of that, I think, has combined with the challenge that we're dealing with loneliness and isolation. See, historically, we would turn to each other during hard times, right? That doesn't mean that we historically would confide all of our problems in each other. But just being around with somebody, even if you're not talking, just knowing that there's somebody there, actually makes a real difference in your life. How many of you have had that experience of just, had a hard day, you're dealing with a conflict, and just being around somebody, even if you're not talking about your problem, actually makes you feel a bit better? Yeah, it's almost all of us. We feel that. There's something about the human bond that's extraordinarily not just powerful, but healing and therapeutic. And if we think about it in that context, the fact that so many people are increasingly isolated creates a real challenge, because that's our natural buffer to stress, human connection. So if we're experiencing more stress from hardship and headlines without a buffer for stress that we've had for millennia, that's a setup for just profound mental health struggles. There are more factors that go in here, but these are three that I think are really powerful and critical here. And look, a lot of this has been exacerbated in some ways by COVID. Many young people that we talk to in the States tell us that COVID hitting didn't just affect them in the moment, but it kind of set them back in terms of their social comfort and social skills. And so going out and sort of gathering the wherewithal to start a conversation, to interact with others, sometimes feels harder, perhaps, than it did before. And that's in part because our social comfort, our sort of social instinct and skill is like a muscle, right? And it gets stronger the more we use it. It gets weaker the less we use it. And if you've ever, I want to ask how many people have been on a gym routine and fallen off, but I will raise my hand and say I have fallen off the wagon. Right? You too. Thank you for being brave. Yeah, and many like me. But if you've ever done that, like you know what it feels like to go back to the gym after you fall off the routine, right? Like that first day is kind of hard. You feel achy. like the day after that first workout back, right? It feels uncomfortable, right? And sometimes it's hard to motivate yourself. But when you keep going and it starts to feel better and better, then you feel stronger and stronger. And then you're like, this is good. I want to keep going to the gym. And social interaction is very similar. When our social muscle has gotten weaker, as it did for many of us during COVID, trying to get back in, trying to like motivate to go and hang out with your friends or get together for a family reunion or go to that mixer that they organize at university, like that can feel like, oh God, that's really hard to do. I don't feel comfortable doing it. But sometimes we just have to push ourselves to do that a little bit. And when we do it more and more, we actually build that muscle back. But in the first few days, it can feel uncomfortable. But I think the pandemic was a contributor, but I don't think we should assume that the pandemic was the sole cause of all of this, right? It was a contributor, but it was pouring gas in a fire that was burning for a long time. And that's why, like, my belief is our approach to mental health and to loneliness and isolation. On the one hand, yes, we do need more help when people are struggling. And I spent some time with some students, like Annie and others, like earlier today, and I got to hear about some of the great resources that are available for students here, which is wonderful. And we need help. We need help that's available when people are actually in crisis, when they're struggling. We need help that people can trust. We need people they can talk to, who they can relate to and be open with. But we also need to get to the root causes of what's driving this deeper challenge. And if we're not finding ways to build stronger social connection, if we're not finding ways to really grapple with something we're going to talk about a little later today, which is just the impact of technology on our happiness and on our relationships, if we're not doing that, then I worry that we are not going to get at the root cause of the problem. And we're going to experience what one university in the US told me recently, which is they said in the last 10 years, they've tripled the number of mental health counselors they have. That's a big deal. They've tripled the number of mental health counselors that they have. And you know what happened to the wait times? Nothing. Because demand also increased threefold during that time. Again, gets to the point of us addressing these deeper root causes.
Yeah, wow. Some really insightful comments there about kind of a lot of the things which are affecting student mental health at the moment. I really like your comment about kind of exercising that social muscle. There's a phrase that gets tossed around at UCL a bit about how do we build our students' kind of mental resilience and methods we can do that. And it's exactly the same sort of metaphor of like, how do we create connection and build belonging and community among students so that that social muscle is exercised more and that they're more able to face mental challenges when they get there. But when it comes to the mental health crisis, I think many people agree there's still a lot of stigma around mental health and discussing mental health. You kind of touched very slightly on it. It's not something that you know, if you sit next to someone waiting for the bus, you're not about to talk to them all about your mental health problems. There's still a big stigma around it in society. What role do you think, how do you think we can kind of tackle that stigma? And do you think young people have anything to do with tackling it? 'Cause at least from things I've seen and many people I've known, young people often, to me, seem more and more willing to discuss mental health, especially online, especially with each other. So what role do you think we play in kind of helping tackle the stigma around mental health and the mental health crisis?
Well, I think young people are already playing a huge role there. And to what you were alluding to, Mary, I think the fact that today in the UK, in the United States, and many countries around the world, we do see more articles written about mental health, we see more public discussion on mental health, is largely because young people pushed for that change. And they didn't do it by protesting in the streets. They did it by leading by example, in talking more openly about mental health, in essentially demonstrating a different way of approaching this subject to older generations who have since learned, I think, from young people. So this is, changing stigma is about culture change, right? It's not about policy change. And culture historically has always been most effectively changed by young people, right? Like you drive, you shape, you move culture, right? And that's actually one of the places I think we've got to continue to work, because the stigma, there is still some of it there though, to your point, Mary. And even we've spent a couple of days here in the UK and had the privilege of speaking with a number of young people, you know, in different parts of the city, and they echoed something similar, which is they said, yeah, it's still a little hard to talk about it, especially, you know, the guys that we met with, the young men, were saying that for them in particular, they're still finding that for men, still not a lot of openness to talk about your feelings, how you're doing, and the groups that are trying to get young men together to talk more have to approach it indirectly They just have to ask for updates on life as opposed to say how you're feeling, right? So we all have to approach it in our own way. But I do think young people leading by example here is extraordinarily powerful and necessary. We're going to need to continue that until we get to where we need to be, which is a place where health and mental health are seen as synonymous, where mental health and physical health are not treated differently, either in conversation or in policy or in our actual healthcare system.
Yeah, no, 100%. A more holistic view of health in general. I think that's really interesting as well, coming from a student union, one that especially that does a lot in the kind of social aspect of student life here, having a more holistic view of how our events are not only helping our students with their physical health, so we have so many different clubs and sports activities, but how that also is affecting their mental health naturally, because it's just, you know, everyone has mental health. So yeah, no, really interesting questions. I want to hear a bit about you and about your kind of experience in American college, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So where did you go to college, and how was your experience growing up as a young person and finding belonging, community, and yeah, how do you think that compares with students now that you're talking to and that you're meeting?
Oh, well, my experience growing up was wonderful overall, but I had my share of challenges. I grew up in Miami, Florida, which is a sunny part of the United States, not too far from Disney World. That's how everyone knows it. How far are you from Disney World? That was, when we talked to folks back home, that was always, we're only 5 hours from Disney World, don't worry. So it was a great place to grow up, and I was fortunate to have parents who loved me, a wonderful sister. But I was very shy and introverted as a kid, and that made it hard to make friends. So I did experience a lot of loneliness as a young kid in elementary school. And I remember my mother would actually, my mother and father recognized at times that I wasn't as social as they would have thought I would be. And not social in the sense that they knew I wanted to hang out with other kids, but noticed I wasn't doing a lot of it. So they would nudge me in their own ways. Like I remember once they sent me to go knock on like several neighbors' doors in the neighborhood because they knew that they had kids, and they wanted me to go and ask those kids if they wanted to play, right? And I remember being first angry at them and then scared, right? I was like, I don't want to go and like knock on their door. What if they say no, right? Like, how am I going to feel then? One of them did say no, as it turns out, confirm my worst fears. But it still was actually an important experience, because one of the things it taught me over time was the importance of actually going up and initiating social interaction and taking some risk. I want to use that word risk actually very intentionally here, because any social interaction, in person in particular, involves some degree of risk. You say hello to someone, maybe they won't be as friendly, they say hello back, right? Maybe you invite somebody to lunch. Maybe they won't want to have lunch with you. Maybe you ask somebody on a date, and maybe they say no. So there are all of these sort of possibilities of rejection when you reach out to somebody else. Maybe you confide in someone, and they aren't sure what to do, and it's awkward, right? But we also, like, if we reflect, I suspect each of us, on the moments in our life and the relationships that are richest, we probably know that there was some moment in that relationship where we had to take a risk. And this is my concern, is that if we never learn to take that risk or get comfortable with that risk, then we won't take it. And we won't build those kind of deep, fulfilling relationships. Because human interaction, the richest of the rich, in terms of relationships, requires some amount of vulnerability. And vulnerability can feel scary, but it's absolutely essential, like in relationships. And so growing up, like, it wasn't easy. I had like those moments of being lonely, but I did benefit from my parents pushing me. I'll show you one other example of from my parents, which is there was a time where we had, I was in high school, and we had this terrible tragedy that happened where two of our classmates were driving off campus for lunch. This is when we were in 10th standard. And they got into a terrible car accident, and one of them died, right? And the other one, who survived, was understandably deeply traumatized. My mother and father said to me, you should go to his house and check on him, make sure he's doing okay, right? Now, he was a friend, sort of. I didn't know him all that well. I was a totally unfamiliar situation. I never had a classmate or a peer die. I didn't know what he would be going through. And I was like, I don't know what to do, what to say. I'm not going to go over. And they said, no, you're going to go over and you're going to check on him because he may not be doing well. He might need a friend. And they drove me over and dropped me at his house. So I went and I knocked on the door. And the truth is that we ended up spending 2 hours together. We didn't talk at all about what happened in that accident. We didn't talk at all about how he was feeling. We talked about other things. We played football outside. He had a dartboard, I still remember. We played darts. We walked around the neighborhood. But at the end of those 2 hours, when my mother came to pick me up, I remember he said, hey, thank you for coming by. This really meant a lot to me. I needed this. And I was like, I always think about that because that was a reminder to me that sometimes we have to step out and open the door for others to step in. And sometimes other people will do that for us, but they'll only do it if we know, if we're comfortable taking a little bit of risk here, right? And we know if we're all in the same boat. So this is something that I struggled with throughout my life. I tried to take these lessons and incorporate them. Sometimes in my life I did better than others. When I went to university, it was an incredibly lonely time in my life. Like I was so used to being with family. I grew up in Miami. I was in Boston. I was like 1,500 miles away from family. It was really, really hard, and it took a while to make friends. But I had to remember what my parents had taught me about the risk part. So slowly, bit by bit, in college, I tried to take a little bit of risk. I remember still to this day, freshman year, going and sitting down next to this group of guys, like in the cafeteria. I didn't know any of them, and I was like, what if they don't want me to sit here? What if they're not friendly? What if they all get up and walk away? Half of them didn't get up and walk away, but that's because class was starting. So I didn't take it personally. But one of the people that that stayed there, right, and who was a guy who was an exceedingly slow eater. I mean, this guy took 3 hours per meal, and I'm not exaggerating
Wow.
here. It was extraordinary. He would go through multiple rounds of people, and I just didn't. I was like, class was starting. I was going to be late, but he was eating, and I was like, I don't want to leave him alone. So I guess I'll just stay here until he's done.
Oh, no.
And so I ended up missing my next class because he just kept going. He ended up becoming one of my best friends in the world. And so he literally texted me when I was on my way here. And he's in California now, and he's going through some hardship, and he was just like wanted to talk about it. But I would never have become friends with him had it not been instilled in me that sometimes you got to take a little bit of risk and sit down with people you don't know, or start a conversation with people who may not want to chat with you. So that's just something I think it's really important for us to build. And honestly, it's not a muscle that you build once and then it's there forever. We have to keep our engagement going with each other. Even though I learned these lessons early in life, when the pandemic hit and I didn't interact with many people and I was on my own, I also felt my social muscle weaken. And it took me time to get back to pushing myself to interact with people again. So if you're feeling that way, it's not because something's wrong with you. It's just that is the nature of social interaction, but it's really vital that we really build up our comfort in engaging with each other again.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to, I feel like we're going to have to move to the Q&A shortly, which is sad, but just as a quick final thing to tie this off, when it comes to taking risks in social interactions, methods of communication nowadays are a lot different to how they were when you were in college, when you were a kid growing up. How do you see young people striking the right balance between getting the most positive aspects out of social media that they can through taking risks, through forming connections? How do you think young people should approach finding that balance between those positive interactions and the more negative effects that social media, we know that it has?
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, how many people use social media? Almost everyone. Right? And how many people feel like you found a great balance in terms of minimizing harms and maximizing benefits on social media? Yeah.
Good job.
Very few people.
Great job.
Good job. We're going to bring you with us, tour you around the country because very few people have found this. It's very hard, right? And I think the vast majority of the UK, the US, and many countries, adults and young people are struggling with how to manage social media. So last year, our office put out a Surgeon General's advisory on social media and youth mental health, where we called attention to the fact that there are some benefits that some people can get from social media in terms of opportunity to express yourself, to connect with old friends, stay in touch with new friends, stay abreast of what's happening on campus, in your community. But there are also some serious downsides, that we have to be aware of and we've got to manage as well. So one thing we documented in our report is that for young people who are on social media for an average of 3 hours a day or more, they face double the risk of anxiety and depression symptoms. When it comes to body image, for example, half of young people who are using social media say it makes them feel worse about their body image. Many people who we talk to, young people in universities all across America, routinely said that being on social media erodes their self-esteem. Every time they check in, they're comparing themselves to other people constantly. And even though in your head it's not real, it's not representative, it still often can make you feel worse about your own life, right? So I think these are real downsides. These are real challenges. And the reason I asked about the balance is that you could say in an ideal world, like you want to interact just in the right way and just in the right amount, so you extract the benefits and you avoid the harms. But that has actually practically become extremely difficult because the platforms were not designed for balance. They were designed to maximize how much time you spend on them. That's actually the revenue model of the platform. You spend more time, that translates to more advertising dollars, that translates to a bigger bottom line, like for the company. So if that's the case, like you're essentially trying to use the force of your willpower against platforms that have been designed by some of the most talented product engineers in the world, right? To bring you in and suck you in. So I say this just to say that if you've been wondering if your lack of balance reflects some sort of genetic defect in the willpower gene, like that's not the case. Like it's not you, it's the environment, right? And the environment is the digital environment. So in the face of that, I think we have to take some serious action as individuals and societally as well. Societally, look, we have been, for more than a year calling for policymakers to be much more aggressive in putting in place real safety standards for social media that limit the use of features that seek to manipulate people's minds into excessive use. We've been seeking to limit exposure to harmful content. We want safety standards that protect people from some of the worst effects of social media, including algorithms that serve up content that in some cases, as we've heard from too many parents, content that encourages sometimes people to harm themselves or in some cases even take their own life when the algorithm realizes that they're sad or in a bad place. Like these are all things that happen because there's an insufficient amount of safety standards and that are actually enforced on these platforms. So there is certainly societal action that needs to take place because the truth is we didn't ask young people and parents to figure out how to make cars safer on their own. We set standards, we enforce those standards, and then companies ultimately made their cars safer. Same has happened here. But while that is happening, as individuals, there's certain things we can do. Like we can actually carve out certain spaces in our life that we want to protect from the negative influences of social media. And that includes, like for college students, university students in particular, the 3 areas of your life, I would say 4, if we can stretch it, that are really critical. 1 is your sleep. The 2nd is your in-person interaction. The 3rd is your learning. And the 4th is your physical activity. These are 4 spaces that you want to protect. Because if you can protect and preserve those, that will help you in terms of your overall development, in terms of your happiness and fulfillment, your health, period. But that means making those spaces as technology-free as possible. When you're with other students, when you're catching up with family, put your devices away and talk to them face-to-face. Seems like hard to do, might seem a little awkward and uncomfortable, but trust me, it matters. And can I call on you for a second? When we were chatting earlier today, you told me that, who was sitting right next to you? Lindsay, yeah. So you told me you and Lindsay had known each other online, on Zoom calls, etc., for more than a year, right? For 3 years. And today was the first time you met in person. Just tell us in like a sentence here, how did it feel to like see each other in person?
It was very joyful when we first kind of realized that, oh, this is the person that I've seen on the Zoom screen for 3 years now. And we know a lot about each other, but to connect that information with a physical person is, I think, different. It was a really nice kind of moment that we had.
Yeah. You know what, you're reflecting literally in those couple of sentences, thousands of years of human evolution. Right? You are. And what you're reflecting is that we were designed for what both of you experienced, which is to feel each other's presence, to notice someone's body language, the facial expressions, the tone of their voice, the sound of their voice, as well as the content of what they say, right? All of that is what goes into making an interaction strong and vital and vibrant, right? So we have to protect that. We've got to make time for in-person interaction, and we've got to also ensure that we are protecting sleep. I always sleep, we think of, you're sleep when you die. You hear that phrase all the time in the United States. I hope you don't use that in the UK, but in case you do, it's all based on this notion that sleep is for the weak, right? It's actually not true. Plenty of science that says sleep is actually what makes you strong, right? You sleep enough in terms of quantity and quality, you are healthier. You're more functional up here. You're more vibrant, right? But our phones have become the biggest sort of toxic ingredient, if you will, in our sleep now, because we're constantly waking up to get a glass of water, go to the bathroom, and we're checking our phone. We intend to go to bed at 10, and then at 12:30 we're still on TikTok, right? There's all kinds of things that happen when you take an addictive tool like to your bed, right, and keep it at your bedside. So that's why I mentioned that in-person time and that time for sleep, we've got to protect, and we've got to protect our learning time as well, so that we can focus, on what we're learning, because our phones can be a powerful distraction. So anyway, all of that just to say that we're negotiating our relationship with technology, and I'm just saying that the status quo now is not good for us. Okay, and it might feel comfortable and familiar, but the data is very clear right now that unless we renegotiate our relationship with social media in particular, and that doesn't mean banish it from your life entirely, although some people have chosen to do that and it's worked out well for them, but it does mean protecting core areas of your life and making sure that above all, we have that precious in-person time to talk to each other, to get together with each other regularly. You were mentioning that class where they made you come together mandatorily in person once a week, right? And we were talking about how if it wasn't mandatory, maybe people wouldn't have done it because it was hard, uncomfortable, what if it's inconvenient? But having done it, there's something powerful that was built in person. So I know sometimes it can feel like a little bit more work, but if we can do that and do that work together, if we can commit to being in person together, if as a university, as workplaces, we can commit to creating spaces to bring people together in person, we can do a lot to help them build the relationships they need to thrive and heal.
Fab. Thank you so much. I would love to keep sitting here and just letting you talk more, but I did promise that we would do some of the questions from the Q&A, so I'll move swiftly onto that. So you've talked a bit about these areas of life that you think we should be protecting, our social life, et cetera, and how that can help people live happier, longer, more connected lives. But often being a lonely adult can be kind of linked to earlier life experiences. So do you think there needs to be more emphasis on promoting connections or identifying loneliness at school, in children, in youth?
Yes, no, because you're absolutely right that these experiences often do start early, and the time where we need to help people build the skills and experiences and tools to experience healthy relationships is very early, right? From the youngest of ages, even before school starts, kids are taking their cues from what they see their parents doing. I still think about so much of how I think about relationships was formed by what I saw at home. I saw my parents calling friends when they were sick or when they lost a job. And that sort of told me, hey, when someone's in crisis, you should show up, right? I remember seeing my parents have gatherings and they would have friends over, on a regular basis. They would go over to their house. And so and those all kind of sort of filtered into my head as, okay, this is what you do. This is how you interact with other people. You build relationships. You show up even when it's inconvenient, when people need you. So we need to build these experiences into people's lives from their earliest stages. But the last thing I'll say on this is I don't think that 50 years ago, maybe this stuff just kind of happened, on its own, because people didn't have the distractions of technology. They didn't move around as much. They tended to be in singular communities and have a limited few shared experiences, which were in person. But in this day and age, because so much has changed, we are more scattered, we move around more, we're more siloed, we're more sequestered on technology and specifically social media. And we're also more in our houses because we don't need to go to the grocery store or the retail store anymore. We order everything in. For all those reasons, we've got to be a lot more intentional about building those social skills and social comfort, which is why even in grade school settings, helping young people develop the social and emotional skills and learnings that they need to build healthy relationships, manage their own emotions, understand the emotions of others, is actually just as vital a life skill as learning how to read or learning arithmetic or learning history. It is just as vital to the survival and well-being of people as they grow up.
Absolutely. Next question here, we've got something very action-focused. So if you could only make 3 changes to someone's life, what 3 changes should people implement in their lives to help them live longer, happier, more connected lives?
Oh, wow.
Only 3.
Only 3. So specifically for connection. Well,
Yeah.
I would say spend 15 minutes a day reaching out to someone in your life. It could be someone, a friend, a family member, an old classmate. It could be anyone, but 15 minutes reaching out to someone you care about, just to check on them, see how they're doing, with no agenda. The second thing I would do is to say that when you're interacting with them on that call, when you're having a conversation with a friend or family member, put away your phone, your devices. And if you're actually talking to them on the phone, put your phone in your pocket, listen to them on your earbuds, or put your phone to your ear, but don't do anything else on your phone. Don't check the scores, check your inbox, look at the weather, text your friends, etc. Like, just focus on single tasking, right? And the third thing I would say is to do one small thing each day to help someone. It could be something really simple, like you notice that your classmate was having a tough time and something just seemed a little off, like on the Zoom meeting that you were having in your in-person group meeting. Maybe you just stay for 2 minutes after and just ask them, hey, I just want to check on you, how are you doing? Or maybe somebody, you're sitting next to somebody in the cafeteria and you just mention something like kind to them, the person who's checking you out, you just say thank you and actually ask how they're doing and actually wait to listen to how they're doing. These small moments of kindness and compassion are how we extend help to others. It's how we serve in a world that's full of pain, and we can actually help to alleviate a lot of that pain simply by showing up, by being kind, by sharing a thoughtful word.
Really thoughtful. Wow, amazing. Another question from the audience. What is the biggest barrier to the development of social relationships in student populations?
Well, I actually, there are a number of barriers, but I actually have sadly come to believe, based on the data and the stories we're now hearing from thousands and thousands of students, that the biggest barrier, I think, has unfortunately become social media, which is a bit of a counterintuitive thing, because you would think it helps to connect people, and it does help in some ways to connect people and keep them tethered. But what matters ultimately is the quality of our relationships, right? Do we have people in our life who we can confide in during a crisis, people who know us for who we are, people who we can be open with and show up with authentically? And for too many people, the answer to that question is, well, I've got about 1,000 followers, I've got 500 contacts, I've got a few hundred friends on social, but I'm not sure if I can necessarily talk to them or reach out to them. So it's those kind of friendships that matter. And I've actually had now many conversations with students who have gone through a struggle trying to balance their use of social media, and have said, I'm just going to take a break for a little while, for maybe a month, and just see how I do without it. And I've often asked them, how did you feel at the end of that? And they usually say, the first few days I felt really twitchy. Like my fingers were like reaching for the app, where I knew it was. And I was wondering what's going on. And I felt cut off. But then as I settled into it, I started to feel better, because I wasn't comparing myself constantly to other people. I started living life on my own terms, because I felt like the world wasn't telling me what to do. I was just kind of thinking about what felt good to do. And I was doing that. And they often say, I feel like I had a smaller number of people that I interacted with, but they were deeper interactions. And I felt better about the relationships. I think it's important for us to be able and to actually be really proactive in renegotiating this relationship we have with social media. I think we have, because something is commonly done, because it seems to be the norm now, does not necessarily mean that it's good for us. And that's really important for us to remember. And because the data is it's clear on this, and it's getting clearer day by day, right? And we have seen the struggles that young people have had with social media. It's not that it can't be used for good, but if we want to use it for good, we've got to recognize what's important to us and fiercely protect that first, right? And that means creating those tech-free zones I talked about around those 4 areas that are of vital importance to our happiness: in-person interaction and sleep, as well as physical activity and learning.
Fabulous. Oh my goodness. It's been really, really enjoyable having you here and giving such insightful opinions and answers to some of these really big questions that are affecting so many young people and students right now. If I can have a quick time check to see if we have time for one more question or no. That's all good. No worries. In which case, thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah,
do you want to have a last word?
One thing I'll just say is, as we're wrapping up, is
of course.
I think that, look, I think that this issue of how to rebuild social connection, this is critical work, not just for our health. And there's one thing I want to underscore, is this is not just a health issue. This is about thriving as human beings. This is about thriving as society. And one of the things that we have developed here in the United States is for our college students was something we called our 5 for 5 challenge. And this is something that we extended to the whole country. But it was a simple way for people to experience the power of human connection, and something that I would offer to all of you. What this 5 for 5 connection is, it's very simple, and it only takes 5 days. So for those of you who are afraid of long-term commitments, this is perfect, okay?
Great.
5 days. So, and it involves taking one active connection each day for the next 5 days. That active connection could be really simple. It could be expressing gratitude to someone. It could be extending support to someone, or it could be asking for help yourself, okay? And at the end of those 5 days, I encourage you to just pause and see how you feel about those connections that you've experienced. What I'd really encourage you to do is actually find somebody to do the 5 for 5 connection challenge with, so that you can both commit to doing it and then compare notes at the end of 5 days. So you can check on each other along the way and say, hey, I did mine today, did you do yours, right? Just make sure that you're both doing it and see how you feel. I'm sorry? This is a great question. So how do you actually connect with the person? So yeah, what I would say is I think of this as being like a ladder of connection in terms of like quality of connection, right? The highest quality connection is in person, right? One rung down from that would be being able to like video chat someone, so you can like actually see them, right? A rung down from that was you talk to them, so you just hear their voice. A rung down from that is you email them, because there's text, but typically you write more in email. And one down for that would be texting them, right? Because you tend to send shorter texts, right? So the most important thing is to connect with them in some way and to go as high up on the ladder as you can, like in those interactions. And the one thing I want to tell you about is to keep this simple, right? To try to make it manageable. Don't try to be like, okay, today my active connection is I'm going to take the train for 45 minutes and go see this friend and spend 2 hours there and come back. So I got to cancel this class and miss that. Like, that's going to be hard. You may not do that out of the bat. Maybe you work up to that. But I'm going to give you an example, as we close, of how to do your first active connection in 60 seconds, okay? And we'll actually do it here together. So what I want you to do is I want you to, for this one, you're going to need your phone, okay? And this is going to be an example of how we repurpose technology in a sense and use it for good. So feel free to take your phone out, and what I'm going to ask you to do for the next 30 seconds is to think about somebody in your life that you're grateful for. It could be somebody who helped you out yesterday, maybe when you're having a hard time. It could be somebody who checked on you last month just to see how you were doing. It could be somebody who showed up in your life a couple of years ago when you were really struggling. Maybe something didn't work out in terms of school. Maybe you didn't get an opportunity you applied for. And that person came and reminded you that you still matter and that they still believed in you. So how many people have somebody in mind that you can think of, somebody you're grateful for? Okay. Now what I want you to do is I want you on your phone to compose an email or a text message to that person. This sounds scary, it's not going to be. And as with all medical procedures, it'll be over before you know it. But I want you just to compose a message and to write something very simple to them. And it could be as simple as, hey, I was just thinking about how you helped me last week. I'm grateful to have you in my life. But whatever it is, just write that 1 or 2 lines to them. Click send, and then I want you to turn the flashlight on your phone. And I want you to hold that light up. Okay? So you can see that light shining up.
Also an impromptu test of who can type the fastest, which I'd love to see.
And also an impromptu test of who can turn on your flashlight. And I would just say that there tends to be a generational, sort of split in who can do this. So if you find you do not know how to turn your flashlight on, turn to somebody who's younger than you. And
Form a connection.
Yes, there we go. All right, so yeah, that's perfect. Just hold your light up. That's great. Got our first light up. We got a second light up. Third light up. Look at this. Oh, there's so many. This is beautiful. And keep those lights up and just start looking around you, see all these lights that are popping up, like around the room. Okay, so keep those up. Keep them up. This is great. Oh, look at that. Another light coming up. Another light.
Whoa.
Oh, just keep the light
The
up.
lights
Keep the light
want to
up.
turn on.
Keep the light
There
up
we
so you
go.
can see them. Yeah. This is great. Okay. Okay, so keep these up, and I want you to just keep looking around. Look at this. All of these lights that you see around you, these all represent like rays of connection that have gone out. Somebody's going to catch that on the other end, is going to open up that message, and is actually going to feel a sense of connection. And I dare say that for many of you, you probably also feel a sense of connection having remembered what this person did for you. That's beautiful. You can put your lights on. That's great. But I hope you just see, just in that 60 seconds, the power of what we were able to do and what you were able to feel. So connection doesn't have to take a lot of time. A little bit of connection could go a long way in helping us rebuild, the social fabric in our lives. And Duke, I want to thank all of you for being here today. I want to thank you for just being a part of this conversation. I want to thank Mary so much for being a conversation partner and my buddy up here. And to thank UCL for hosting us and giving us a chance to be here. I'll just say that the reason that we came, not just here, but to other colleges, other universities, is because I truly believe that if we want to build more connection and address the loneliness crisis we have, we've got to start with young people. Not only because it's affecting young people the most in terms of numbers, but because what we're trying to do is change behavior and culture. And that has always been what young people have done best. Like when you lead the way in pushing generations ahead of you to think differently, to act differently, then society becomes different. And fundamentally, like that's what we've got to do here, right? So just as you have led the way, your generation, in helping people talk more openly about mental health, I think you can also lead the way when it comes to helping us re-engineer our relationship with technology, refocus on putting people back at the center of our lives, and ultimately building the kind of connection that all of us want and need to truly thrive. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.